All right, we're in the home stretch here. One more topic. We saved the best for last. We're going to be talking about social impact, and we have with us Christine Deska.
Am I the shortest presenter here? Yes. So while the presentation's getting loaded up, I'm going to ask everybody to stand up for a minute, if you're able, and go like this. Ah, doesn't that feel good? Has anyone seen the TED Talk on power poses? Any fans of that one? A few? Yes. So, for those of you that have not, if you hold this for 2 minutes, studies have shown that you will be more confident and more assertive. So I'm empowering all of you to be more assertive during my presentation. Okay. Oh, it's on set? Yeah. All right. So when Ken asked me to speak at this event, I was obviously thrilled. I am obviously thrilled. This is a great event. And I was here last year, sitting in one of the chairs here. And what first came to mind when he told me what time slot I was getting was last year, I was about 5 months pregnant, and I had pretty much had a little bit of every single thing in the buffet that day. And so by the time the last presenter came on, my eyelids were getting a little heavy. So I'm hoping that by starting out with our power pose, I've given you a little boost of energy so we can jump into this. Ken is still holding his power pose. Jump into, yes, and I have to pick up my little baby later and also keep my energy up as well. So I am so lucky to be able to talk to you about a really important topic in the nonprofit sector, social return on investment. It's a term actually I didn't hear too often while I worked in the nonprofit sector for over 13 years, but started hearing it actually while I was going through business school and started really kind of becoming aware of the vast nature of the nonprofit space and why measuring social impact is so important. I didn't really realize I was in the thick of it, in the trenches, that's what we were doing, but in a little bit of a different way sometimes. So what are we going to talk about today? Why S Roi? What is it? How to calculate it, how to use it, and also extremely important is how to communicate it. So it may seem obvious, but why is it so important to quantify your success? Measuring your organization's impact is no longer optional. And here's why. Here's just a few trends, things happening in the space right now. Accountability. GuideStar now reports that 4,500 out of 5,000 organizations, quote, would support high-impact nonprofits if they could readily find information on organizations' effectiveness. So what does that mean? It means funders are actually out there looking for this information. So think about your organization and how you're presenting that. And we'll talk a lot more about this in the communication part of this presentation. But is this in your annual report? Is it posted on your site? Is it easily accessible, readily available for possible funders who are looking at where what organizations to support? Fiscal responsibility, also no longer optional. Your financial health is so important, and having a good grasp of that. As leaders at organizations, funders are looking for you to have a good grasp and understanding of how your organization is doing financially. And lastly, heightened competition. I may have missed this in the beginning of the event today, but I think I learned this last year that on Long Island alone, there are over 3,500 nonprofit organizations. And when you also take into account that we're bumped right up against the behemoth of New York City, you've got this extreme competition a lot of times for the same funds. When we look at what's going on in government right now, and this, the administration, unfortunately, I know of some organizations who are kind of worried about the government funding they've relied on for quite some time, being there for them in the coming years. So it's important, to know that these factors really lead to funders looking for what is your social return on investment. So What is it? So you may have heard of this called the triple bottom line, because it's not just looking at traditional return. You're looking at the people you serve, the planet that we all share, and kind of calculating what dollar amount is going back into the community. So you want to get to the point for your programming that you can say, for every dollar spent on X program, this number of dollars goes back into the community. Now, with traditional ROI, this is kind of an easy calculation, but when it comes to social ROI, it can get kind of complex, which is why it can fall through the cracks, taking into account how understaffed and overwhelmed a lot of nonprofit organizations are at times. And that was my experience for sure. So I'll kind of break this down into three components, key components of SROI. The first being, may sound obvious, but tracking spending. Not just what you grab from a funder or wherever you're getting your funding from and put into a program, but the people power behind a given program. The people power to manage the person who is managing the volunteers who are supporting a given program. And then on the other side of it, if you have a mostly volunteer-led program, this can really work to your advantage in terms of how much are you saving by utilizing volunteers to deliver on your mission impact. Secondly, and this is huge, and Ken actually, when we were discussing this topic, said, well, how are you gonna, let people know what the right metrics are? Well, I really, can't go down that road. That could be an entire, presentation in and of itself, because deciding what your metrics are, given your programming, given your mission area, it's going to vary quite a bit. But making sure that you're counting and quantifying as much as you can within your programs is vital. We will go into a lot more detail on that today too. And then lastly, research. It's not quite so fun and exciting, but you know what? Today we've been talking about accounting. We've had a lot of stuff with law here today. So along those lines, research is a key component of SROI, because you have to be aware of what data is already out there, what existing credible research is out there given your mission area. You going to say something, Ken?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. So when you're talking about tracking spending, are you talking about some along the lines of leverage that you're producing as an organization? So if I'm in a situation where I have, as you said, volunteers, or maybe I'm training doctors in a foreign space, is that part of your tracking spending to understand really not necessarily just what am I doing, but what is the reach of what I'm doing having in terms of a ripple effect?
So we're really focused on the input part of it right now, which is really what are you as an organization putting into a given program to employ it in the community. So not the other side of it, not what's coming out of it yet, what's going into it for now. Going back to metrics, really incorporating compelling metrics that you can reliably track. I want to kind of emphasize that as well, because a lot of times I've seen organizations set up programming and think, oh, we're going to keep track of this to determine our program's success, and then down the line, they determine that it's not feasible. They don't have the proper systems in place to track a given metric. So really kind of thinking at the onset, or even making tweaks along the way in terms of what metrics to define. I guess the formatting is a little, sorry about the formatting. It looked good before. Yes, go ahead.
I had a question which I think is like a follow-up or clarification of Ken's question. So before we go on, if we could just go to the slide that says, what is social return on investment?
Sure.
And the example you have is 1 to 5. For every dollar spent, $5 of value goes back into the community. Does that mean for that organization that 1/6 is spent on overhead? Is that what you're getting at here? I'm not understanding that properly.
No,
I'm sorry to take you back, but I didn't get it.
No, thank you so much for asking that clarifying question. That's really important. That's just simply an example of what you want to get to with a given program. It doesn't necessarily refer to or define anything related to overhead. This is just an example of, and we're going to go through kind of these steps to take to get to this statement in defining and calculating SROI. So it doesn't have any implication related specifically to overhead. Say more.
I think this goes back to what I said before about leverage. So if I'm putting $1, and Christine mentioned that we're talking about inputs right now, and they will be talking about outputs. I think that's what this is talking about. We put $1 in, we get $5 out in terms of impact on the overall economy, or if that comes into the bottom line, people, planet, and time. So I think that's what.
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Ken. So just looking a little bit more closely at a few buckets here: inputs, outputs, and then really what we're looking to get to, I think this is actually related to both of the points that were just made, is outcomes. So inputs, as we've just discussed, is everything you're putting into your programming, all of the resources going in. Outputs, we're really looking at the tangible program metrics, things that you're probably already counting. Everyone in here is using a lot of best practices already. So the things that are kind of easier to count when it comes to your programs. And then most importantly, and as it's related to SROI, is outcomes. So what is your program's impact? And that's what we're going to kind of delve deeper into in this talk, and its effect on the community. And even more so, the future impact of your programs. So my partner Frank and I have worked with organizations who tend to kind of stop sometimes there and not, continue on with surveying, continuing on to really see the full impact of the programs and the people that they've helped or the animals that they've served. How are their programs living on, and how to really track that. So continuing, how do we get to outcomes? So back to the research bucket. And I'll give an example here. When I worked at AARP, I worked a lot on older adult hunger. I worked a lot on older adult poverty. And we had to quickly come up with what's going to be our baseline for making sure we can show the impact of our work. And in partnership with AARP Foundation, as well as the New York Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTDA or OTDA, we were able to find that they were keeping a month-to-month record of how many older adults were receiving SNAP, formerly called food stamps, and we were able to see what age groups they were tracking. So based on that information, we were able to tailor our program to make sure that our outcomes align with this existing research. Therefore, in every press release, in every event, in every messaging opportunity we had about the work we were doing, we were able to align our work with this existing research and making sure that we could connect those dots in a way where we could really describe the economic impact we were having. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with the SNAP program, it's for every dollar someone spends on their EBT card, I think it's almost $2, or was it $1.63, it might be different now, goes back into the community. So that was a key piece of research we were able to use and really run with, because we weren't only helping older people lift themselves out of poverty, we were also helping the local economy through our work. So the second point on this slide is the layers. So in my experience, and I'm sure some of you can relate who've been in the nonprofit sector for a while, our favorite thing to talk about is the stories of our work, why we're passionate about our mission oftentimes. And sometimes it's hard to go from the anecdotal to the quantifiable. So again, drilling down on what existing data is out there. Some examples here that I've just listed, but we'll talk about more in detail, are extra lifetime earnings, social gains, internship earnings. These are examples of data points that are out there if your program is servicing high-risk youth, for example. And you can kind of tie your programming back to those data points to prove your impact in the community. And lastly, process and implementation. How are you organizing this information? Is it easily accessible? Do you have the right spreadsheet or software needed to make sure that you're able to track reliably and accurately your metrics? So this is a question that I suggest folks ask at a strategic planning meeting. It can really get the conversation going and kind of get the wheels turning in terms of what is our impact. So to ask, what would happen if this program did not exist? And continuing along with the example I mentioned earlier, to say, in the case of the program I worked on for many years, if we do nothing, a given number of older New Yorkers will fall into poverty and be unable to afford food, thus putting their health at risk. Now, we could have even taken that further and gone toward, how many people would then end up needing services through Medicaid, and what would that cost be, and so on. But we were very focused on this issue of older adult hunger, so we continued with, if we spend a certain amount of money to fund this particular program, this number of older New Yorkers will be lifted out of poverty and generate X in economic activity. So that's just one example. Now, I'm going to turn it to you. So you've got 5 minutes at your tables, and I'd like you to think of a program you're working on now, think of an initiative. You could have been working on this for years, or it could be something new, something that you're thinking of doing, and jot down and discuss with your table mates metrics that you've defined. And reflect, are those the right metrics? Are those working for you at your organization? Maybe you'll see something should be tweaked. Maybe you're going to reaffirm the fact that we know what we're doing. We've been doing this right for quite some time. And then to also think, are you stopping at outputs, just doing the counting of the metrics in a given program, or have you taken it that step further to outcomes, to be able to really tell the story in numbers of your impact on the community? So let's see. It is 11:47. So at 11:52, I'll go around and probably ask, I think we're good on time, so I'll ask maybe as many tables as I can to kind of share a best practice or an aha moment that's come out of this conversation. Any questions before we jump into this discussion? All right, you're off. 5 minutes, tick-tock. All right, everybody, we got to get started again. So who's going to be the brave first soul to share a best practice? Oh, we have an eager person over here. I like that. So for the folks on the webinar, this is the lone microphone that the webinar can hear. So we are using this microphone for everything.
What we discussed was the challenge that most organizations are facing of changing their paradigm and their mindset from being an inside out to an outside in, and to really first determining what those categories are that we want to analyze, so that you can really then set the measurement status for what does a program and its outcomes really cost, and is that what the funder is going to want to hear?
Wow, very succinctly put and very, very pertinent to this conversation, and you've reminded me of a story to tell later. Thank you so much. Good job, table 2. We'll call you table 2. Who's next? Who would like to share? Oh, now everybody's shy because you did such a good job. Over here? Yeah, oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Charlene Miller. I'm the director of the Art League of Long Island in Dix Hills. And hi, everybody. And we are a visual arts education center and not-for-profit. And before we do anything, we have a lot of creative people on the staff, and lots of people have ideas. And but before we jump out of the gate, I make sure that we are able to, find out, number one, do we have a budget to do this? What is it going to cost us in labor, materials, expenses? And what is the outcome? Where are we going with this? What is it going to do for the Art League? Is it going to bring new business to the Art League or increase existing business? And what is it going to do for the community? How are we giving back to the community? So I'm trying to train my people to think in metrics, measurable results, rather than just ideas that are big picture, but require analysis and really getting down in the weeds of how we're going to get there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Your organization is certainly lucky to have you, and you have fans. You have fans here. One more table would like to share a best practice or aha moment? Coined by Oprah. Can't risk stealing things from Oprah, right?
Hi, my name is Dana Castoria. I am from the Long Island Alzheimer's Foundation. We are a day center for seniors with dementia, based in Westbury, previously Port Washington. we implemented a new program called Music in Memory, where we are trying to not only stimulate but also relax our clients using music. As you know, dementia unfortunately affects people of ages from 60 to 90, can start as early as 55. So there are different generations of music. So the program really focuses on each individual having their own iPod with their own individual playlist. That way they can, sorry, I'm a little shaky. That way they can really utilize the program at home, not just in a facility. Unfortunately, as a not-for-profit, we don't have funds for music players or iPods. We also are struggling to find time on our day-to-day basis to meet with the individuals, see what music they like, and create a playlist. So that's where we're struggling a little bit, but my table team has made some great suggestions, and hopefully I'll be able to bring that back at work.
Thank you so much for sharing. And if I remember correctly, I think, were you all featured at the Imagine Awards for your program? So congratulations. So I hope that, you know, talking with your table mates also gave you some ideas, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So many best practices are out there, and we just don't have a, you know, moment to stop and say, hold on a second, you know, let's see what we're doing. Oh, would you like to share? Oh yeah, go ahead.
When you start up a population that is more sheltered, and you're talking about the impact of, well, how does this affect the community? What give back is there to the community? How do you measure that?
Could you restate that? Sorry, I was thinking about the microphone.
In certain populations that tend to be sheltered, or programs that serve certain populations that shelter is probably the best way to say it, that aren't necessarily out in the community and things like that. How do you show part of that impact on the community if most of the programs that you're doing really do just benefit the individual, help bring them, you know, help their cognitive function, things along those lines?
Great question. Okay, I follow you. So, you know, you have to kind of think about, you know, so for example, in the case of dementia patients, you know, are there costs attached to this particular population that could be avoided because of your program? In a slide coming up, we'll kind of say, like, if we do nothing, you know, this number of dementia patients could cost our healthcare system X. Is that something you can get to? Does that exist? So kind of think. Right. So if a particular patient is likely to then need additional additional support from the government or additional support in another way, can you kind of quantify the impact your program is having? And so because of your program, because of the metrics that you're tracking, this number of people are now not likely going to need this dollar amount of support, if that helps. But you have to really kind of dig deep to get to that sometimes. And Ken, you brought up a great example before.
You're doing work in the drug area, and you can look in terms of recidivism, and
Yep.
you can look at the fact that 90%, let's say 60% of all individuals who go through treatment typically end up back needing treatment again. And through your program, you're able to drop that from 60 to 50. That 10% differential, what impact did that have? Those are the types of things that you're trying to figure out. What are the key factors that you have within your organization, and how do you measure those factors?
Right, and along the same lines, if you're serving high-risk youth and you know that typically a certain population of high-risk youth are unlikely to graduate from a four-year school, and you know that because of your program, this many students will, and then continuing on, what are the likely salaries that they're going to be paid because your program has now equipped them with certain skills they wouldn't have previously had. Kind of really taking it along those lines. Go ahead.
It's not just the salaries that you need, that they're going to get paid. It's also if a lot of them would have wound up on the welfare system,
Exactly.
Incarcerated and stuff like that, and now they're going to be productive members of society instead of non-productive members of society. What's the value of that?
You can ask for your advice on developmental disabilities.
We can go about that.
Thanks so much. So Have you heard anybody say this? I mean, I certainly have. But the numbers, they're just numbers. They don't really tell, the impact of our programs. They don't tell the stories of the people we're helping. My partner and I help an animal welfare organization. And every time we talk with them, they can't wait to tell us about the most recent animal they've been able to provide a life-saving surgery for, because that's what they live for. That is the reason they created their organization. And our focus is really, so how many animals and what is the savings by you, taking on this surgery versus them having to go down another road? Or how many animals would unfortunately not make it had it not been for your organization? How many families are you having an impact on because your programs helped people who cannot afford surgery for their animals to get access to this particular type of treatment? If you don't take anything else away from this presentation, I'm not trying to say that it's just SROI, it's just numbers, because that's not the case. It does not replace the stories and the passion that you have for your missions. You really have to kind of find a way to pair the two. So when we talk about communicating SROI, it's just as important as calculating it, because if nobody knows and nobody's hearing about your work, if a tree falls in the forest, you have to be able to communicate it in an effective way. And, so these are some questions that I wanted to pose, thinking about who are your target audiences, and in what ways do you maybe think about tailoring your collaterals or tailoring your messaging, given who you're speaking to. So potential funders is a big one. Funding is always at the forefront of our minds in the nonprofit sector. So how to present this information to funders. The public, your members, volunteers, community partners, and then the channels for getting that information to your target audiences in an effective way. I remember coming out of a pitch meeting with a big New York City funder, and my whole team and we kind of said, all they want to know about is the numbers. We were so frustrated because they just kept saying, but what about this specifically? How much will this cost? And how many and how many and how many? And we really wanted to also be able to tell the story of our impact. And so it was kind of that push and pull. And so what I've learned, over and over again is some people are going to be more focused on that number in a given moment, and others will want to hear that story. But if you can find a way to pair the two, your organization will benefit. So another fun discussion for you all to think about and have is, how are you communicating your social impact? Maybe you can think of a couple components of your marketing mix. How are you getting information out to whatever target audience you want to think about today? Are you reaching them in an effective manner? Why or why not? And, maybe some of you are thinking, but how do I know if it's effective? What would be the answer to that? Metrics, metrics, metrics. So it all goes back to metrics in terms of thinking about how you're tracking your effectiveness, whether it's media hits, impressions, or the number of partner organizations you're able to work with because of your impact. So hopefully that kind of gets the wheels turning a little bit. It is 12:04, so maybe I'll even give you one extra minute. So 12:10, I'll go back around and ask you to share an aha moment or best practice around communication. And any questions before we jump in? Yes.
Should you also consider the people that you potentially serve as members of your audience?
Absolutely, because if you're able to convey your impact to the people that you're serving, your organization is likely to grow because word of mouth in the community. 100%, yes. Okay, let the discussions begin. You've got 5 minutes. So, who would like to share the first best practice or aha moment from their table discussion? Or do I have to go to a table and demand that you share? Or is it this person that Ken would like me to bother? So, did any best practices, thank you, come from your talk? Pressure, peer pressure?
Hi there, yes. I'm Les from Habitat for Humanity of Suffolk, and my aha moment is that Habitat may be able to communicate in using social media and the press, our website, the good work that we do in building homes for families in need, but we don't necessarily measure that return on investment, and we need to do a better job of doing that and how we impact the community, homeowners that are paying taxes when they move into their home, the number of contractors and suppliers that we pay to assist us in building our homes, and the amount of money we put back into the community, our restore warehouse and the amount of donations that come through to restore and don't go to the landfill, all measurable items that we should be communicating better.
Great. And can I ask you a follow-up on that? I think it would benefit the whole group. Of all of the metrics that you've just mentioned, and you mentioned a lot, how many do you think you would tweak based on kind of thinking about this a bit more approximately? Or are there new metrics that you're mentioning now that you've not previously been measuring that you're going to incorporate into your programs? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I couldn't.
No, I think all of those items that I mentioned are measurable, and I think Habitat has always based our success on the families that we serve and the homes that we complete. And again, that's just a singular measure, and all of those other items really need to be considered.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Great. In the pink.
Hello, I'm Renee from Girls Inc. of Long Island. So we do something called the Strong, Smart, Bold Outcome Survey because our mission is to empower girls to be strong, smart, and bold. That also equates to being healthy, educated, and independent. So with this new survey, it allows us to kind of determine, are they stronger? Are they smarter? Are they bolder? Are the programs that we're delivering giving them the tools that they need to be all of those things? And when it comes to communicating our ROI, we're becoming more and more strategic every day and aligning our outcomes with constituents that we feel is important. You know, the fact that our girls are less likely to engage in risky behaviors or less likely to use substance abuse or when it comes to body image issues or cyberbullying. So we can line that up with like legislators who stand on the platforms of reducing incidents in cyberbullying and things like that. So we communicate through social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So we get a lot of interaction on social media. We communicate it through our newsletters. We communicate, we have collateral that we use when we're meeting with either funders or legislators, and testimonials. And we're actually going to be using a lot more testimonials. We're doing a lot more gatherings of stories from the girls as far as the impact that they have directly so that they can communicate the benefits and the value of the Girls Inc. experience for us, because I think it'll be more effective hearing directly from them who's impacted by the program than hearing from us.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So you're in a situation where you said you do surveys. So you've got all these surveys that are filled out. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. If you have all these surveys that are being filled out, how are you taking those surveys and converting them into quantifiable information where you can actually come up with those metrics and those dollar amounts of the impact that you're truly having? Because the surveys just give you the raw data that you need in order to then go through that analysis.
Great question. Put you on the spot.
I know, put me right on the spot. But so with regards to the surveys, we used to do them as paper surveys. Like each of our programs had like a pre and post survey. Now it's an electronic format, and it's something that we are able to participate with Girls Inc. on a national level so that we can draw the information from all of our locations who are participating in the Strong, Smart, and Bold survey. So the girls actually have to take home permission slips that they're able to engage in this process. And then during session, they come back on, during certain parts of the session towards the end, and they actually go on the computer and they complete these surveys, and all of this information is tabulated nationally and locally. So we can look at what our impact is here. As far as so we've got a lot of raw data, and it's great, and we're able to pull together some great information and statistics as far as the number of girls impacted in different areas. But I think we still have a little bit of work to do to put that into actual numbers so that it makes sense for each of the affiliates.
Thank you so much for sharing. So this is a great example of the impact that surveying done well can have. It sounds like you guys really take the time to structure your surveys very carefully, making sure that you're tracking the folks that you serve beyond your programming. And to follow up on Ken's point, it's that taking that raw data and then finding a way to pair it with some of the research that you mentioned in terms of the likely risk factors of some of the young people getting involved in different things. You're also kind of able to match that against data of how many high-risk young women are, coming up against cyberbullying, and then versus what about the young women that are going through your program. So it sounds like you guys are doing a great job, and thank you so much for sharing all that information. Round of applause. Other best practices, aha moments? Before I drop the microphone in the center of someone's table? Let's see. We haven't heard from this table, have we? Anybody going to be brave, bold? Of course, Tommy would be.
What is that supposed to mean? Of course, Tommy wants to talk. Hi, I'm Tommy DeMisa. Right now, I'm here representing the Lindy Lou Foundation, and this is actually an aha moment from earlier, not from this segment. And we're a foundation, so we have one big event a year, and we get a lot of money, and then I go around with a big check, and I hand out that money to organizations working in the special needs community. And the aha moment I had is, I'm trying to extend our income stream aside from just that one day in March when we get our funds. So when I sit with somebody, I don't really like the microphone. When I sit with somebody, I like
It's
to
for the
no good?
webinar.
Really? Oh, it's through the webinar. I'm sorry, I'm back. When I sit with a group that's going to potentially get some funding, I want to know this data. I want to know the impact they're making. So, but now I'm learning I need to twist that around so I can show to potential donors to us what the Lindy Lou is doing through those things. So it's just like getting very, very deep into the rabbit hole for me. And it's exciting because it's a way I can go to potential funders for us. So that's my aha moment. And thank you, Christine.
Thank you for sharing. So, I mean, even if you just start to think more deeply about, how your organization communicates and who your target audiences are, that is a plus, because these are kind of the things that when you're doing your day-to-day work in the trenches can kind of fall by the wayside sometimes. I mean, I know a lot of nonprofit organizations that don't have a dedicated marketing communications staff person. And if you're in that situation, then you really have to come up with a plan ahead of time in terms of how are these elements going to be executed. And I'll just share, as you take a peek at these infographics and you have the slides, an aha moment for me related to communication, which I've kind of used in every aspect of my life, communicating from a nonprofit organization now with nonprofit sector strategies. And this came from when we had a team leader come in when I was working at a nonprofit. A team consultant came in and was letting us know about, are you an effective communicator? And what they mentioned was, the thought you're trying to communicate, say that's letter A. Are you it's only good communication if what you intended to communicate is what the recipient now knows or has in their mind. And so I immediately took this home to my husband and let him know that, of course, you understand what I'm saying, right? And, at times we can think we're putting out the most effective information with what our organizations do and with who we're interacting with. But if that information is not received in the way that we intended it to be, sometimes it's falling short. And so, just keep in mind when a given piece of collateral is created for your community, for who you're serving, may not be the same piece of collateral you want to use when you're trying to get additional funding, or a message that you put out in an e-blast may not be the same message you want to then take onto Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter without kind of tailoring that to the medium that you're using. And so I wanted to put up a few infographic examples here just to kind of show visually what some organizations are doing really well in terms of really highlighting, does this not stand out on this collateral piece right here. So this organization is taking students through a training program, and because of the data that's out there, and this is paired with, I think it's a 12-page report that kind of goes through how they calculated this data, but this is the piece, you know, that's front and center, that for every dollar invested, $13.46 is going back into the community. So wouldn't we all want to be able to say that about some of the programs we work on? It's phenomenal. And then going back to the other conversation piece, this says, if we do nothing, these 100 people will cost the public service system $7 million. The cost to change the lives of those 100 people would be $2.7 million. So you've got 7 million or 2.7 million. Now, granted, this is a little bit vague, right? So this isn't what you're going to put in front of that funder that wants all the nitty-gritty numbers. But when you want to get the attention of people, and to know how successful your programs are and the impact that you're having, this is something to consider. This is a way to really, you know, get those eyes to pop. It's not 7 million, it would be 2.7. All right, so to wrap up, how we approach SROI with the organizations that we work with, make it count. So quantify, quantify, quantify. You know, put a process in place wherever you can to count your inputs and outputs, and you know, really do that intentionally. Make it easy. You know, we're all really busy, and when you're meeting with funders, they're not going to be experts necessarily in your area of the nonprofit space. You know, I don't know a lot about Habitat for Humanity other than, you know, in general what you do. So if you're getting in front of a funder who's not well versed in that space, you know, keep it simple for them. You know, don't throw around acronyms. You know, be very easy with, you know, the terminology that you use, and then keep it fast. Did you know our attention spans are now only 8 seconds? It might have gone down since I last looked at this, because now that I have a baby, I'm on Snapchat. Don't ask me how that happened. So, I mean, it's just coming at us constantly, this information. So even when you think about 8 seconds, you know, what can you convey to someone to really get your point across in 8 seconds? Something to keep in mind. Visual, to the point of the infographic. Whenever you can pair an effective infographic with the success of your programs and those metrics, it's always going to resonate. And lastly, nothing that, you know, I think is done when it's related to mission impact is without a story. And so when you're trying to, you know, grab the attention of the media, always pairing a story with something is more effective, because nothing can replace tugging at the heartstrings. Nothing can replace, you know, connecting through emotions, especially when you all are literally changing people's lives every day with your work. So with that, thank you so much for your time. Any other questions? I'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So I want to wrap up a couple things. First of all, Lisa had mentioned that on one of her slides, slide 11, on her presentation, that there was a date that was wrong on the slide 11. It said April 9th. It should have said April 1st. So just keep in mind that, you know, the requirement outlined on slide 11 of Lisa's presentation should say April 1st and not April 9th. A couple things. I told you I'd come back to it at the end. If everybody can please fill in the evaluation form, that's extremely important. We need that. If you need CPE, you can fill out the sign out outside for the CPE. Don't forget, any of you who have EO 38 requirements, your Executive Order 38 survey or application or form, whatever, is due by June 30th if you're a December 31st year-end filer. So make sure you get your EO 38 filing in. That's if you get government funding from the state and you fall into certain criteria. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate you coming. We like your feedback. If we can be of any service to you, or if any of the presenters today could be of any service to you, feel free to reach out. Thanks a lot.